What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so we are really continuing, not really getting into, but we're continuing Scott Snyder's Justice League. Now, this picks up really with the creation and continuation of like the Hall of Justice, but it also deals with a group called the Coronavores, which is kind of an interesting concept. What Scott Snyder does, or at least like what it seems like he does, is he's taking like these old school JLA stories, like Justice League of America, really just Justice League nowadays, but he's taking like these Justice League stories from like the early to mid 60s and kind of like blending them in with the kind of stories that we expect in this day and age. But initially this deals with Superman facing off against these coronavore things, which are basically like these small little drones that basically consume like solar energy. Now, the whole time this is happening, you've got Superman talking directly to Batman. It's one of these things where like Scott Snyder kind of confirms these small little things. For example, Superman holds his breath in space. He doesn't actually breathe in space, little things like that. Small little things that really contribute to a greater whole. But the entire time this is happening, Batman's warning Superman that these are just small drones that feed off of solar energy. And the Superman, while he is in the presence of the yellow sun, there's got to be some kind of like a mega around there somewhere, some being that's powerful enough to basically kill Superman. Now, one thing to bear in mind and one thing to notice here is that Superman doesn't really seem to care. He's not really worried about them. He's just kind of like, yeah, you know, they're a thing that's there. And it's interesting, but it's a little disconcerting at the same time, because normally when it comes to really anything powerful enough to potentially kill Superman, that Superman himself usually shifts away from being just kind of like not really concerned and becomes concerned. Not so much because of the fact that it may or may not kill him. That's usually not what he's worried about. It's because if it's something out there powerful enough to physically challenge him, then what does it say about the other superheroes on Earth? There's a few characters here and there, but with regards to the Earth populace, it'd be a legitimate threat. And so what this does is it switches back to Earth and it focuses with the opening of the Hall of Justice. Now, really, if anything, this is like a Scott Snyder love letter to DC fans. And I feel like it's something that was very much needed. I feel like it's something that was very much needed in the sense that Scott Snyder kind of saying, hey, DC fans, we love you. We haven't forgotten about you. We know that a lot of you guys really love the Hall of Justice. A lot of you guys really enjoyed having that whole thing around where you had sort of like a Earth-based place where the Justice League would operate out of. It's a throwback to the things that so many DC fans missed after the New 52 happened, bringing back a lot of these old familiar things. Now, one of the reasons why the Hall of Justice is so cool here is because while it is an operating base for the Justice League, it's also a tourist attraction, basically. People can go there and they can like tour the whole place. And what makes that so interesting is the Justice League will operate out of it while people are touring through it. And so it's like you go in there and you see everything that goes on, like here's where we conduct our meetings, all these different things. Oh, hey, there's Green Lantern, you know, like it's these cool little moments, these cool little things. And this is really a hallmark of DC. This is one of the ways that DC kind of stood out from Marvel Comics in a lot of different ways, is fans could live vicariously through the normal Earthlings that are going through the Hall of Justice and imagine what it would be like to actually tour through that itself. And it seems like it wouldn't be that big of a thing, but if you're somebody who's born and raised in DC Comics, it's a core part of your reading base. This is a way that DC would connect with fans. Now, with regards to this little moment here, the Justice League kind of hanging out and talking with each other, we switch over to Flash and we switch over to John Stewart, the Green Lantern. And this is a very important conversation because as we've known, or as we've seen from Scott Snyder's totality arc, that is to say like his first arc in Justice League, that things are changing. And they have been for some time. Following the events of Dark Knight's Metal, there was a crack in the source wall, the multiverse is bleeding, and it's basically dying. That with the establishment of the ultraviolet cores, with the establishment of like the Still Force and the Sage Force and things like that, the universe is changing rapidly in ways that like a lot of the superheroes cannot really keep up with. And so that's when Barry talks to John Stewart and says, no, what you have to do is you can't focus on the things that are shifting so rapidly. You have to focus on what you know and use that as your anchor point. Now, this is Barry coming to this whole experience from a variety of different places, right? I mean, it's him coming from this with like, hey, I was trapped in the Speed Force. My escape from the Speed Force was orchestrated by having an anchor in the main DC universe in the form of Iris West, of my wife, that I could basically reach out to and pull myself out of the Speed Force. But it's also a little deeper than that. It's also the idea that like things do change, like life changes all the time, and it can be very, very, very scary, especially when it's a huge change in a very short amount of time. Losing a job, having a breakup, moving from one location to the next. These oftentimes set in psychological responses, depression, anxiety, things like that. So like we all experience these things, and that's why Scott Snyder writing is so relatable, because while it does deal with superhero antics and, you know, the Court of Owls and Batman and the Joker returning with his face cut off, at the end of the day, it is like a shift in the status quo. And it's an extreme shift in the status quo that we can relate to because we experience those extreme shifts in status quo. So again, from there, we end up going into Diana Prince talking with Aquaman, because of course, Green Lantern and Flash are basically called off by Batman saying, hey, look, things are getting ready to pop off at the moon. Superman's going to need some help. He says he doesn't need it, but like he does. So like we all need to go help him out. But shifting over to Aquaman and Wonder Woman, what we end up finding out is that what's been happening here at the Hall of Justice is that each members of the Justice League have created their domain, kind of a safe place for themselves, a place that's basically like all their own. And so for Aquaman, it's kind of a mock-up of Atlantis, you know, with like his father's boat and something akin to Amnesty Bay. With Superman, it's basically like his work desk at the Daily Planet. With Batman, it's the coolest. Okay, let me tell you something. Like, I feel like Bruce Wayne, if he'd formed a club when he was a kid, it would just be like a no girls allowed club. You know, like it's literally a bat symbol that says keep out. How cool is that? Like, see, stuff like that makes me want to hang out with Batman. Like, wouldn't it be cool to join like a Batman club where it's like, okay, guys, we are at the first official meeting of the Bat Club. No girls allowed. And it's like, yeah, it's like, I feel like, oh, you know what it would be like? It would be like the treehouse from like Sandlot. That's what it would be like. But you guys understand what I'm saying here. These are small little sections of the Hall of Justice that are modeled after each individual person. Now, the most interesting thing here is Martian Manhunter. That's what's so intriguing here. Martian Manhunter has historically been a character who's a fish out of water, so to speak, right? Like originally when he first showed up in DC Comics, he was just a Martian on Earth and his people existed on Mars. It wasn't until later on, going into like the later years leading up to Crisis on Infinite Earths and especially post-Crisis, that he was like quote unquote the last of his kind and always wanted to return home. He was very Superman-esque in that regard. Now, that was just a build-up because of the fact that when he was first introduced, he was a stand-in for Superman on the Justice League, so DC didn't have to worry about overexposing Superman and driving away fans who otherwise would have had a reason to read his character. And so as Martian Manhunter was on the Justice League, he basically became closer to Superman in terms of how he was depicted, hence the reason why he ended up being the last of his kind. But for that reason, Martian Manhunter doesn't really have a home. He's got little bits of history and little things like that, but his whole area is just kind of like a giant void. It's basically just like this giant vault, more or less. And what he does is he caters the appearance of the vault to whoever shows up there. When you've got Hawkgirl, you've got like this giant trophy room. You know, you've got all these cool little things. You know, like the Justice League Dark's headquarters, or like these this giant magically infused place. I mean, it's cool little things here. And the idea is that Wonder Woman hasn't quite found where she belongs. That seems to be the indication, and it works because for the most part, Diana Prince has always kind of been homeless, so to speak, which is to say, she was booted out of she left Themyscira and she could never go back. During Greg Rucka's run, it was established that all the time she thought she was returning to Themyscira, she never was. That she's never actually been back to Themyscira, which is kind of a cool thing. But because of the fact that she's just kind of there and sort of occupies a space, that it seems like from her perspective, she hasn't really built her hall because she feels lost. But the reality is that she's been building it this whole time. These pillars she's been establishing, they're based on faith. Her faith in being a superhero, her faith in her team. And so it's basically like, hey, look, I don't really need to have a place to operate as home. And we know at the end of the day, she's sharing a bed with somebody. But like you know, it's like I don't really need to have a bed per se or have like a home per se. But like we know that like I have faith in everything, and the Justice League is my home, more or less, you know, something akin to that. But it's kind of a cool thing because with this mega showing up and with Superman still on the moon, Batman, of course, assembles everybody and says, hey, you guys all have to respond. And this is when we get this explanation for why Superman's not too worried about it. Because Superman's response is, no, Batman, there is nothing to worry about because you sent this coronavore here. You sent this here because like, hey, we have to team up. We have to change as a team. And Superman recognizes that because when it comes to the Justice League in recent years, they've kind of been fractured. And that's one of the things that people have noticed. It's one of the things that I've noticed. You look at New 52 Justice League, you look at the early days of Rebirth Justice League, and they're somewhat of a fractured team. I mean, sure, they work together, but they're together by circumstance. They're not really together because they see themselves as an actual team. And this is one of those circumstances where the more things change, the more they stay the same. Justice League made their debut in Brave and the Bold, and then they got their own solo series back in the 50s and 60s, and that runs up for 25 years in A Crisis on Infinite Earths. DC disbands the team. They launched Justice League International. Then we get like Extreme Justice, and we get Justice League Europe, and so on and so forth. That goes into 1998 when Grant Morrison brings them back with JLA Volume 2. And so with that whole thing, that was like the return of the Justice League. It was the world needs the Justice League. And that's when they started operating as more of a cohesive team. Now, at the end of the day, they still had problems because you had like Tower of Babel, where Batman was just being a dick. But the idea here is that each member of the Justice League represents something significant. Martian Manhunter is the unifying factor, the one that holds the team together, if only due to his telepathy. You've got Kira Saunders, you got Hawkgirl, and sometimes Hawkman, who exists as this kind of, hey, we lived 1,000 lives 1,000 times. We've got all kinds of history and experience that we bring to the table. Batman's the brains of the operation. Superman and Wonder Woman are the brawn of the operation. Everybody has their own sort of role they play. But for Superman, he's also kind of like the hope of the operation. It's never too late to win. win. There's always hope to come out at the end of the day. And that's kind of what Superman recognizes, the role that he plays, the role that Batman plays. Hey, look, we're fine as a team. What we needed was something cohesive. What we needed was a home to call our own. And we have that in the form of the Hall of Justice. That's what we have. We have to be the Justice League team that the world looks up to, that the world aspires to, the world sees as kind of like saviors for them. We have to embody hope. And so long as we function as a team, so long as we work as a cohesive unit, we will have that. And that's what's so cool, is because Superman, as he exists now in DC Rebirth, is a Superman from before the New 52, the version that everybody missed. And he kind of comes along and says, guys, like, we're good. We just haven't recognized what each of us brings to the table, but now we do. Now we realize we are a cohesive team. We've had a lot of crappy circumstances recently. We've had Dark Knight's Metal, we've had Justice Lost, we've had Justice League No Justice, we've had a lot of issues going on, but we're still together. And that has to speak for something. As long as we take comfort in that, then we can go forward as an actual team. Beautifully written story. Absolutely amazing story. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.